From the time she was a little girl, Aria always felt like the outsider. Not unloved, but misunderstood. She could be in a room full of people and still feel invisible. Her parents were religious. Every Sunday, they were in church. Every dinner opened with prayer. But Aria, she didn't feel what they felt. She watched their hands raise in worship, their smiles glow in prayer. But she felt nothing, except pressure. "Why don't I feel him like you do?" she asked once. Her mother replied, "You have to choose him, Aria." But something in her spirit whispered, "Why should I chase someone who never chased me?" By the time she turned 17, Aria stopped going to church. She started choosing the world instead. Parties, boys, validation from likes, and late-night texts. A constant search to fill a hole she didn't understand. "I'm just living my truth," she'd say. But truth without love felt empty. And love without roots didn't last. She moved out at 19. Stopped answering her parents' calls. Told herself she was free. But freedom without peace is still a prison. One night, after another fight with her on-again, off-again boyfriend, she sat in the dark on her apartment floor. Mascara running. Bottle empty. Heart hollow. She whispered through tears, "God, if you're even real, why didn't you come find me?" There was no thunder, no vision. But in the silence, a memory returned. A Sunday school teacher's voice. "Even when you run, Jesus follows. He doesn't force, but he waits." She shook it off. Old fairy tales for weak people. And yet, she didn't feel strong. A few months later, Aria got pregnant. The father vanished. The shame returned stronger than ever. She walked into a clinic with one decision, and walked out with a pain she would carry for years. The following Sunday, she passed a church on her walk home. Something tugged at her heart. She stared at the doors, tried to take a step. But guilt screamed louder. "You don't belong there. You didn't choose him. Why would he choose you?" She walked away. That night, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her childhood friend, Zoe. "Hey, weird question. I felt like I needed to reach out. You okay?" Aria stared at the screen. No one had asked her that in months. She replied, "Not really. Can we talk?" They met for coffee. Zoe didn't judge. She listened. She held Aria's hand when she cried. And before they parted, Zoe said one sentence that stayed with her. "You may have walked away from him, but he never stopped choosing you." That night, Aria had a dream. She was running through a forest, breathless. She kept running, afraid of what she didn't know, until she tripped, fell. And as the shadows closed in, a hand reached down. A voice, gentle and strong, whispered, "You don't have to run anymore." She woke up crying, for the first time in years. She whispered, "Jesus, if you're still there, I don't know how to find you. But if you really want me, then come find me." The morning after the dream, Aria sat at her kitchen table, staring at a bowl of cereal she wasn't hungry for. The words still echoed in her heart. "You don't have to run anymore." But what did that even mean? She had made her choices. She had walked away. More than once. She told herself, "I left that version of life behind." Yet something wouldn't let her forget. Zoe texted again later that week. "Want to come with me to church Sunday? No pressure. Just maybe it's time." Aria didn't answer. She stared at the message all night. The next morning, she typed 3 words. "Okay, I'll come." She almost deleted it. But her finger hit send before fear could. Sunday came. Her hand shook as she stood in front of the church doors. Worship music echoed inside. Laughter, hugs, voices. To her, it felt like holy ground, and she wasn't worthy to stand on it. Zoe came outside and smiled warmly. "You're not late. Come in when you're ready. I saved you a seat." Aria sat in the very back. During worship, she didn't sing. She just listened, watched. People lifted hands, sang with eyes closed, some weeping. She whispered under her breath, "I don't know what I've done." But as if reading her thoughts, the worship leader spoke between songs. "You may feel like your mistakes have made you unworthy, but grace was never about you being worthy. It was always about him being willing." A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. The message that day wasn't about punishment or rules. It was about the lost sheep, the shepherd who left the 99. He didn't wait for the sheep to come back. He went out and found it. And when he did, he carried it home. Aria felt something warm and strange stir in her chest. A flicker, a spark. She didn't understand it, but she didn't reject it either. After the service, Zoe hugged her tightly. "I'm proud of you for coming," Aria whispered back. "I don't know what I believe yet, but something felt different." Zoe just smiled. "That's how it starts." That night, Aria journaled. Not about her pain, but about possibility. She wrote a question: could God really still want someone like me? And without understanding why, she wrote a second line beneath it: he never stopped. Over the next few weeks, she kept coming back. Not because she felt whole, but because she felt something calling her. She started reading the Bible again. At first, just the red letters, Jesus words. She found comfort in his tone. He didn't shame the woman caught in adultery. He didn't avoid the bleeding woman. He didn't ignore the tax collector. He chose them. Is it possible? He chose me too, she whispered one night. Then came the test. Her ex-boyfriend called. The one who left when she needed him most. He wanted to talk. Said he missed her. Said he had changed. The old Aria would have run back. She wanted love. She wanted validation. But something in her had changed too. She said no. For the first time, she chose herself. And maybe, just maybe, she chose him. That night, she sat in bed, Bible open. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She was at peace. And she heard it again. Not a voice from the clouds, but a whisper in her heart. I loved you before you ever looked for me. I chose you when you felt unchoosable. She closed her eyes and said her first real prayer in years. Jesus, I'm not perfect. I don't even know how to do this. But if you really chose me first, then I want to start choosing you back. And for the first time, she felt like she belonged. The days that followed Aria's quiet prayer felt different. Not perfect, just clearer. She still had questions, still doubted herself. But there was this persistent pull, like the wind gently nudging her forward. At church, she began attending a women's group. They shared stories. Some had survived abuse. Some had lost children. Some had battled addiction. And they were still standing, still chosen, still loved. One night, as she shared her own story with the group, her voice cracked. I've done things I don't want to remember. There are days I still think God must have made a mistake with me. But the leader, a soft-spoken woman named Miriam, reached for her hand. Aria, you're not God's mistake. You're his miracle. That sentence followed her home. She repeated it in the mirror, though she didn't believe it yet. Not a mistake, a miracle. But just as her faith began to root itself, the enemy knocked, in the form of a letter. A college application she had filled out months ago had been rejected. Another opportunity gone. Her thoughts spiraled. Maybe this is proof I'm still not enough. I pray, I try, and things still fall apart. She skipped church that weekend. Didn't answer Zoe's texts. Closed the Bible halfway through Psalms and tossed it aside. Late that Sunday night, she walked to the river near her apartment. She hadn't been there in years. This was where she used to cry when the world was too loud. She whispered into the darkness, God, if you really did choose me, why does everything still feel broken? No voice answered, just wind, and then a memory. Zoe's voice, once again. Faith doesn't erase the storm. It teaches you who's holding you through it. The next morning, a note was taped to her door. It was from her neighbor, Mr. Collins, an old retired widower who barely spoke to anyone. Heard you walking late last night. I don't know what you're facing, but I was praying for you. God hasn't given up on you. Neither should you. She wept. God hadn't shouted. He whispered again. Through a stranger's compassion, she returned to the women's group the next week. When Miriam asked how she was, Aria didn't lie. I almost walked away again. Not from God, from myself. Miriam smiled. That means you're growing. The enemy fights hardest when heaven's about to break through. That night, Aria opened her Bible again. Not because she had to, but because she needed to. She found herself in Luke 15 again. The prodigal son. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him and ran to him. She whispered, even when I don't run fast enough, you run toward me. That week, she applied for a local internship at a youth center. She didn't have much experience, just honesty and a heart trying to change. To her surprise, she got it. One of the leaders there said, "You have a way of connecting with the brokenhearted, like someone who's lived it." She smiled, because she had. And because the very wounds that once shamed her were now the reason she could love others well. The past didn't disappear. The memories didn't vanish. But their power began to weaken. Because now, she had a truth louder than the lies. He chose me. Not because I was perfect, but because I was worth it to him. The internship at the youth center was more than a job for Aria. It became a place of redemption. Every conversation with the teens reminded her how far she had come and how much further God was taking her. One afternoon, while she was leading a group on overcoming identity lies, a boy named Eli raised his hand. "Miss Aria, what if the person who hurt you never says sorry? What if they don't think they did anything wrong?" The room went quiet. So did Aria's soul, because the question hit too close. That night, she couldn't sleep. She tossed, turned, and then she opened the small wooden box she hadn't touched in years. Inside were photos of her father, the man who had walked out when she was 12. No bouvier, no explanation, just silence. For years, she blamed herself. Maybe she wasn't enough. Maybe she was too much. Maybe that's why God never stayed either. She stared at an old note he had left behind. "You'll understand someday." She never did, but something in her whispered now. Maybe it's time to let go. Not for him, for you. She called her mother the next day. "Mom, have you heard from him?" There was a long pause. He called once. Years ago. Said he regretted a lot. I didn't know if you wanted to know. Aria's heart raced. She asked for a number, and for 2 days she stared at it. On the third day, she dialed. A gruff voice answered. "Hello." She froze. Then finally, "Dad, it's Aria." Silence. Then a slow, shaky breath. "Aria, I thought you'd never want to speak to me again." She bit her lip to stop it from trembling. "Maybe I didn't. But I don't want to carry the weight anymore. I'm not calling to accuse. I'm calling to forgive." They talked for 42 minutes. He didn't justify himself. He wept. He said, "I chose selfishness. I thought you were better off." "I was wrong." She replied, "I thought God left me like you did. But now I see he was the one who stayed." When she hung up, she fell to her knees. Not from pain, but from release. Forgiveness didn't erase the past, but it unlocked the future. And in that moment, she heard it again, so gently. "You chose to forgive because I chose you first, even when you didn't choose me." That Sunday, she shared her story with the women's group. No tears of sorrow, only joy. The father I lost was replaced by the father who never left. And now, I finally believe I'm worthy of love. Later that week, one of the youth center girls ran up to her crying. "You told us God never gives up on us. I think I want to believe that now." Aria hugged her tightly, because now she truly did believe it herself. 6 months passed. Aria had grown into a quiet force of hope at the youth center. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living with purpose, clarity, and a slow but steady faith. But the closer she walked with Jesus, the more she realized he didn't just save me to sit still. He called me to rise. One day, the center director approached her with an unexpected offer. "We're launching a mentorship program for young women at risk. We want you to lead it." Aria's heart skipped. Then it sank. All the old voices returned. "You? Led? You're barely holding your own story together. You're not trained. You still cry at night sometimes. You're not good enough." She smiled politely and said, "I'll think about it." But inside, she was terrified. That night, she sat in the same spot on the floor where she once begged God to show up. She whispered, "Why me? There are better people. People who didn't mess up like I did. People who never walked away." She flipped open her Bible. It landed on John 15, verse 16. "You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last." She read it aloud 3 times. Each time, something in her cracked open a little more. She accepted the role. The first week was overwhelming. She doubted every sentence that came out of her mouth. But the girls listened. They connected. They asked her questions no one else could answer because she had lived through it. One girl named Taylor stayed behind after a session. "Miss Aria, how do you know God still wants you after everything?" Aria didn't flinch. She looked her in the eyes and said, "Because I didn't find him. He found me. I didn't choose him, but he never stopped choosing me. And that love, it changes everything." Taylor broke down sobbing, and Aria just held her. Later that night, Aria journaled. "I used to think I was disqualified by my brokenness. But now I see, God uses the cracks to shine through." The mentorship program grew. So did her faith. And one Sunday morning, standing before her church, Aria shared her full testimony publicly for the first time. "I ran. I fell. I broke things and broke myself. But he never walked away. He loved me before I knew how to love him. He chose me first when I was still covered in shame. And he still chooses me now." People wept. Not because her story was perfect, but because it was real. That night, alone in her room, she prayed not to ask, but to thank. "Jesus, I see it now. You didn't need me to be perfect. You just wanted me willing. And even when I couldn't choose you, you chose me." Again and again and again. And for the first time in her life, she felt completely and undeniably whole. The mentorship program Aria led was no longer just a few girls in a classroom. It had grown into a citywide movement. Churches began asking her to speak. Schools invited her to share her story. Even local news wrote about how a once-forgotten girl was helping others find their way home. But Aria never sought the spotlight. Her focus stayed on the one girl crying in the back, the one teen who wouldn't speak for weeks, the one child still too scared to hope. She remembered what it was like to be them, and she knew, if Jesus chose me when I felt invisible, I'll show them they're seen too. At one youth event, Aria noticed a young woman who never made eye contact. Her name was Renee. She wouldn't speak, wouldn't smile. She just sat in the last row every week. One night after the session, Aria walked back and gently asked, "Is it okay if I sit beside you?" Renee nodded. No words were exchanged for several minutes. Then softly, Aria said, "I don't know your story, but I know what it's like to carry shame so deep, you forget you're allowed to breathe. If you need to talk, I'm here. No pressure, just presence." Tears silently streamed down Renee's face. The next week, Renee stayed after and whispered, "I thought God was punishing me. That maybe he picked the wrong girl. But when you talk, I feel like he still sees me." Aria took her hands and said gently, "He does. And he's not mad. He's moved by every part of your story, even the ones you try to erase." Renee eventually shared that she had tried to take her life months before, but someone, kept stopping her. Now I think it was him, holding me back, waiting for someone like you to remind me I mattered. More girls came. More stories were shared. And Aria realized this wasn't just her healing anymore. It was a harvest. God was turning her tears into testimonies, her past into power, her scars into stories that opened prison doors for others. One night, walking home, she whispered aloud, "Jesus, what would have happened if I never came back to you?" And deep within, she heard it again. "I would have kept chasing you. Because I never chose you for what you do. I chose you because I love you." And that was enough. More than ministry, more than applause, more than redemption. It was the eternal truth she had finally claimed as her own. He chose me first, when I was at my worst, and still chooses me now. Years passed. The world changed. Seasons shifted, but Aria's fire for the forgotten never dimmed. She had become more than a mentor. She was now a founder. The First Love Foundation, a safe home and spiritual refuge for girls who had been abused, abandoned, or trafficked, opened its doors in the same city where Aria once believed she was unworthy of love. What once tried to bury her now bore fruit. And through every cracked wall of that center, love poured out, because Jesus had filled it. Renee, the girl who once sat silent in the back row, was now leading her own mentorship group. She stood where Aria once stood. She spoke the same truth. You are not your trauma. You are not your mistake. You are not too broken to be chosen. He picked you first, and he's not changing his mind. One afternoon, an elderly woman knocked on the door of the center. Aria opened it and blinked in surprise. It was her father. Older, slower, eyes heavy with time. He carried a box. I heard what you built here. I wanted to see it before I leave this earth. He handed her the box. Inside were pictures, a Bible, and a letter. I know I failed you, but I've spent every year since trying to love better, even if from afar. I've prayed for you every day, and I want you to know I've chosen Christ now too. Because of you. She cried in his arms, not from pain, but from healing. A few weeks later, Aria was invited to speak in national conference. Tens of thousands of people in the crowd, millions watching online. She stood on stage, trembling, and whispered, I never wanted a stage. I only wanted peace. But Jesus gave me more than peace. He gave me purpose. Not because I deserved it, but because he chose me when I didn't even know I needed him. She paused, looked out into the lights, and said, some of you are still running. Some of you still believe your past disqualifies you. But you don't choose God first. He chose you. And he's still choosing you now. The room exploded in silence, not applause, because the weight of truth stilled everyone. When she stepped off stage, she whispered again, Jesus, I'm not worthy. And in her spirit, a voice replied, I never asked you to be worthy. I just asked you to be willing. And you said yes. That's why the world is changing. Years later, long after Aria retired from daily ministry, her story was still being told. Books were written. Documentaries were made. But more importantly, girls found Jesus. Women found worth. Broken ones found their voice. Because one woman who almost gave up decided to believe. He chose me first, and that choice changed everything. One night, an 18-year-old girl sat alone in her room. She had been abused, abandoned, on the verge of ending it all. She found a video of Aria's testimony online, watched it, cried harder than she ever had, then whispered through tears, Jesus, I don't know how to choose you. But if you already chose me, then I say yes. That girl went on to become a pastor, and the legacy continued, because Jesus never stops choosing. Even when we fail, even when we doubt, even when we run, his love goes first. His grace runs deepest. His choice stands forever. Final line. He chose you first, long before you knew his name. And now, everything begins to change.